students, today we begin week 10 focusing on registration and licensing norms and formalities. So dear students, already we have covered a large portion of what are the requirements needed and mandatory for an exporter to be a good and successful exporter and get repeat contracts over time. Now, we will touch upon various exporter and importer registration formalities. So, dear students, let us begin today's lecture. What are we going to cover today? Today we are going to cover what is registration, why is it important, what are the core IDs, and we will look at all the core IDs required at a glance. What is IEC and why is it used and important for exporting, and how does one apply for getting an IEC code? Next would be digital signature and e-authorization. Dear students, this is a digitalized world, and to make things smooth, nowadays, digital signatures hold importance in all the arenas of economic activities. And international trade is not behind in adopting digital signatures. What is a digital signature and what is a digital authorization we would be covering during this lecture. How does an exporter proceed with approval and providing of e-authorization and digital signature will also be touched upon during this lecture. Next, we would be looking into Bank AD and EBRC. In the previous lectures, we have already touched upon what a bank realization certificate is. Today, we will also look it into deeply, and we will be associating it with Bank AD code. Next, we would be looking into ICE gate setup. Further, we would also discuss GST basics for exporters. Sector registrations would be an important discussion point today. Finally, we will look at what are the basic hygiene required by an exporter in terms of data, and why is it important in terms of and with reference to minimizing delays in the shipment, and also minimizing and reducing delays in realization of export proceeds. We would also be covering what are the common pitfalls or what are the common wrongs and misdoings which can backfire an exporter during the entire export procedure. So, we would be looking into what are the little details that have to be catered upon by every exporter, and any misplacement in these categories would be a huge loss for the exporter. Lastly, we would be looking upon a quick checklist for pre-shipping. So dear students, let us begin with what registration is and why does it matter for export. Dear students, registration is very important for an exporter, and it is also important for domestic sellers. Since international trade is more complex and tedious, and it involves a lot of trust on the part of the other partners, it is important for every exporter to be registered with the appropriate authorities in the governing country. Without being registered properly according to the mandate of the authorities of the concerned country, it would be hard and nearly impossible for any domestic entity or any company to try to export to a foreign company or a foreign destination. So, we can say that registration is a legal and banking ID that is required and mandatory in order for any merchant or manufacturer to engage in either import or export. It is also important and is fetched by the bank, utilized by the bank in order to get the foreign exchange or realize export proceeds from the destination of foreign country. Why is it important? Because the customs and government portals require it in order to identify the particular exporter or importer. The registration code that is given to you or to an exporter on proper application and approval by the government helps the exporter to connect and associate with ICE Gate, DGFT, GST and e-bank realization certificate. It is also very important as it eases some later formalities, as it will clean setup avoids payment or refund delays. Obviously, if there is no error in code and all the formalities of registration to approval are up to date, it would be beneficial for the exporter to receive export proceeds and the transaction would be finally settled by the bank in proper smooth flow. Dear students, let us move ahead and get a quick glance of all the core IDs. Dear students, as a common citizen, there are particular IDs that you have to apply for and the government issues those IDs to the citizens of the country which mark as a identity for the citizen. Similarly, in international trade, every exporter and importer maintains certain codes and certain registrations without which they are unable to export or import or engage in any kind of international transaction. This is the basic point. The other point is, even if they have registered and later there are any mismatches in these registration codes, it would be hard for them to receive and avail any schemes or benefits or any tariff liberalization benefits just because their code was wrong or there was a mismatch found at a later stage in the entire export or import procedure. So these minute errors might derail the entire transaction and they might also put an exporter or importer into danger for future transactions with the same foreign country or with several other partners. So these errors can also be disadvantageous for the reputation of the exporter or importer. Dear students, here is a list of some basic IDs or registrations that are required by every exporter. The first is a permanent account number. It is a basic ID for GST filing as well as getting the importer-exporter code. IEC is simply an importer-exporter code. Who supplies it? It is supplied by the DGFT, Directorate General of Foreign Trade. So there is a particular procedure on how an exporter can apply for this particular IEC code. So IEC code is the basic requirement before exporting or importing. And In order to file for DGFT, the basic requirement is furnishing of a correct PAN number. The next important ID is Bank AD code. What is a Bank AD code? Bank AD code refers to Bank Authorized Dealer. Bank Authorized Dealer. So the bank is authorizing the particular dealer to engage in export procedure, and the bank on the behalf of the exporter would be receiving the export proceeds from the importer. It is important because the bank will be handling your foreign exchange at whichever port you are registered. There is one more point that is important to note here, which is the Bank AD code must be supplied at every port where you are deciding to ship your export consignment from. So, in case you are trying to export your consignment from Mumbai port, and also you are making another consignment and shipping your consignment from Gujarat port. So at both of these ports, your Bank AD code must be supplied. Dear students, there is one more optional code, which is Udyam MSME, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises code. It holds a lot of benefits, but it is optional and not a mandatory requirement for every exporter. Now let us see what an IEC or Importer Export Code is. It is a DGFT code which enables import or export. We can also call it as a business identification number. So IEC code in essence is a kind of identification for your business. It is PAN based, as I have already told you. The basic and fundamental document that you must have, that an exporter must have and should be supplied before applying for an IEC code in the DGFT portal is a permanent account number. The activation and entire process of application is online now, and every exporter should maintain an updated profile from time to time. And it is a one-time application. An exporter need not renew it annually or at any other time interval, but if there are any changes in the business, then those changes must be properly tracked and maintained, updated on the DGFT portal. How do we apply? How does an exporter apply for an IEC code? So, an exporter must log in on the DGFT portal under the option Apply IEC. First of all, he or she must create a DGFT login, user and password. Link this registration detail with the PAN or GST number. Once it is linked, then you enter your firm details, your firm name, the address, bank, upload your PAN as a proof and a cancelled check. Then you pay the fee. The IEC will be allotted online. In several cases, the DGFT or the designated team can also make a visit to the addresses that you have mentioned in order to verify the business. So this is the simplest procedure to apply for IEC code. Now let us look at what a digital signature and e-authorization is. So when you are applying for an IEC code, once you have received the IEC code, you will have to provide your signature as well. In that case, only digital signature is allowed, and there also the specification should be class 3 token. It is mandatory for DGFT and ISGATE filings. Without a digital signature certificate of class 3, it would not take your application and your application will not be going ahead. Your DSC is important because it will be mapped to various accounts. So, in order to be accurate, you must avoid any discrepancies, any errors. And your signature should be KYC compliant. So, it is linked to your current account and your current account should be KYC compliant. Now let us look closely at what bank AD code and eBRC holds. So AD code letter is being given from the bank and it is a authorized dealer code as mentioned before. So at each port that you are going to ship your consignment from, you need to register with your AD code. So if you are shipping from 3 or 4 ports at a time, at every port you would be registering with your AD code letter. So this AD code letter is issued by the bank. Why is it needed? Because it maps refunds and eBRC to your account. Refunds for what? Refunds here means all the schemes that an exporter is eligible for and is going ahead with. For example, as we discussed, either EPCG scheme or PIS scheme or even some duty drawbacks like RODTEP schemes. So, if an exporter can qualify to get refunds of duties and taxes under the RODTEP scheme, those refunds will be only credited to the exporter's accounts if he or she supplies the AD code. So this is the significance of the AD code. So any errors in getting a AD code letter would also create delays in getting any refunds, any paybacks. Also, the settlement of digital bank realization certificate. The payment of your goods from the importer could also be delayed because of this error. Here is a quick tip for any exporter. Re-register if you change the account or branch. So, in order to set up your account in the iSCADE website, you will have to create a user, link your IEC code and AD code in the iSCADE account. Where is it used? It is used to track your shipping bills, Export General Manifest or EGM, any drawback schemes or benefits, integrated goods and services taxes, RODTEP. Now let us also see what are the GST basics for exporters. So any exporter can take either of the two paths mentioned here. The first path is export by paying IGST and then after you can claim the refund of those IGST duties. The second path is export under LUT or bond and you can then claim ITC refund. So in both of these stages, you can actually use the setup of GSTIN, LUT, and you must furnish correct HS code and you should map the taxes correctly. One thing that is important here is all the invoices and whatever the tax returns are must match shipping bills. Now here we look into sector-wise registrations. So depending on what sector your products fall into, your registrations might be additional and it might be in addition to what we have discussed so far. So in addition to an IEC number and AD code, there are other additional registrations as well, depending on which sector you are concerned with. In the case of food or agriculture sector, there are certain certificates or inspections that are required. For example, a certificate from FSSAI or Agriculture Product Export Development Authority, APEDA, or in the case of marine products, Marine Product Export Development Authority. Similarly, there are dedicated commodity boards in the Ministry of Commerce, for example, Spices Board, Tea Board. So an additional certification or inspection certificate might be needed in such commodities. Then we have the pharma or chemical sector. The additional certifications required here can be CDSCO or BIS, but it should be notified separately and clearly in the importer's code of conduct. The next sector is textile sector. At any point of the entire procedure, textiles committee might give some recommendation or some certification might be necessary to furnish from textile committee. But that has to be governed by the particular importer country or the specifications mentioned in the particular exports of the product. Next can be the electricals or IT sector, information technology sector. Here some standards or certifications might be required from the BIS as well as the TEC. Dear students, let us move ahead. Till now we have seen some fundamental registrations and licenses that are required by every exporter regardless of which sector they are from. However, sector specific registrations might be required and it depends on which sector the exporter is exporting from. The fundamental codes or the fundamental registrations required by each exporter are an IEC code, an AD code, bank AD code, PAN card, PAN number, GST. Dear students, let us now look into registration cum membership certificate or digital registration cum membership certificate. So it gives a membership for various export promotion councils like EEPC, AEPC, Chemical Exports Council, CAP, Excel, etc. Why is it used? It is used in order to be aware of policy updates, various fairs, and what are the new certifications that can be required. What are the documents required? IEC, PAN, GST, product list, and fee. Students, let us now discuss some quick examples pertaining to various kind of sectors. So here is an MSME specializing in the export of spices. What would be the various steps that the MSME would go through in order to fulfill an export order? As we all know, the fundamental and basic step would be getting a PAN number, a GSTIN number, activating the IEC code through DGFT. And since this is an MSME and we have already seen that it is optional, but given that this is an MSME, they can also get a Udyam certification. In order to have the sector specific certification, FSSAI certificate and Spices Board registration is important in this case. At every port of shipment, the spice exporter would have to supply the authorized dealer code and for IceGate login as well. This entire smooth furnishing and registration of the spice exporter would result in readiness of the exporter to file shipping bills and avail any .PEP scheme benefits. So here we have seen how the registration flows and how it is driven by which sector the exporter is from. In this particular example, the exporter has to furnish and make some additional registration formalities which are from FSSAI as well as Spices Board of India. Let us look at another example involving an auto parts exporter. The steps would be the same, using the PAN number and applying for the IEC code, getting the IEC code, compliance with the BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards, or REACH needs for the HS code. What will be the future of the auto parts exporter? DGFT profile is ready for EPCG if they are deciding on upgrading machines. So here we learned that proper registration and proper flow and sequencing of registration formalities is important for the exporter, not only for making a proper and timely shipment, but also to close the deal and get all the benefits that they qualify for in the various schemes given by the Government of India. So in this case, this is an auto part manufacturer. They might require a new machine, or they might want to upgrade their machine because the previous machine is obsolete, and in order to enhance their productivity, they import or upgrade the machine involved in the manufacture of the exports. So, dear students, we have already studied that they are eligible to claim zero duty rate or concessional duty rate for the import of this capital good. But in order to avail this benefit, this particular registration formality is crucial for the exporter to understand and go about in the manner specified by the DGFT. This is a third example involving a kitchen equipment importer. So, this kitchen equipment might be intended for a specified use, and in such cases, whenever an import of a machinery or capital goods is done with the purpose of a specified use, it can be claimed, it can be applied under the IGCR scheme 2017. Input of goods under concessional rate of duty. The steps would remain the same. Here we can see that the importer is using an airport route, an aircraft to import their shipment. So, the AD code would be required at the airport. In order to claim any IGST, ITC in books, they have to follow the particular registration formalities and also to avail concessional rate duty import under the IGCR 2017 scheme. So, on the whole, we have looked into 3 crisp examples, making a strong case for why registration and licensing formalities is crucial for the exporter and importer to understand. And any mismatch, any untowards happening in the formalities at this stage would be a burden and cost for the exporter and importer as well. Now, these are several basic hygiene that any exporter importer is expected to follow with the goal of preventing delays in the shipment or realization of export proceeds or claiming of any refunds of taxes or duties. Every exporter and importer must make it a point to recheck that the names and the addresses in all the documents, in all the registrations are same. So, there must be no mismatch. It must not happen that an exporter or importer has given a different name in the DGFT portal and a different name in iSCATE. At various steps, they have to check the same thing, whether it be PAN number, GST, IEC, in the bank and in all the invoices. The second most important thing to check is the HS code. Any kind of typos in the description of the commodity must be rechecked, must be avoided. And above all, the signatories. All the digital signatures must be updated and all the authorizations must also be updated. This means that if there is any change that has happened in the company, exporter company or importer company, that must be notified to the bank and also must be updated in the IEC profile in accordance with the DGFT rules. Now let us look at banking and forex linkages. We all know that a digital banking realization certificate is issued after export realizations once the export payment is received. And this EBRC is important to claim any amount, any type of incentives that are provided by the DGFT or the Government of India. Regardless of all these information and smooth registration being supported by the DGFT nowadays, there are still some pitfalls that exporters and importers fall into. What are these? Wrong bank or address on importer-exporter code. AD code not registered at port. So the AD code is not registered at every code, and thus what will happen? The refunds or the duty drawbacks would not be credited. Digital signature certificates not mapped. Sector specific license is missing. And what is the consequence of all these things? The cargo will not be released at the customs. The customs officials will hold the whole cargo. Here is a quick pre-shipment checklist that every exporter and importer must do. They must check regularly whether the IEC is active and the DGFT profile is updated with any latest changes in the organization. They must also see that the digital invoice is applicable. They must regularly check IceGate login and authorized dealer code at the chosen airport. And as mentioned before, every sector specific license or registration or certificate must be there. Bank KYC and purpose codes must be aligned. So dear students, what do we take away from this lecture today? And what would be the next steps? Every exporter and importer must start with clean IDs, open accounts at the DGFT portal or the IceGate portal, join council plus sector licenses, synchronize details across systems like DGFT, IceGate, GST, Bank eBRC, and maintain a renewal or changes tracker. Any changes that have occurred in the company or the organization must be regularly tracked and it should be updated in the portal. Thank you dear students, and we'll catch up in the next lecture.